Hello and welcome back to Rev Real Estate School. I'm your host, Michael Montgomery, and joined by Jess today. How you doing?
Doing great. How are you, Mike?
Good. Excited for this because we're jumping into agent Q&A. And just so everybody knows, you're more than welcome to send us an email or just head over to revrealestateschool.com and fill out a contact us form and put your question in. And we're more than happy to answer them live on the show. And we have a couple of questions kind of along the same lines today, but we're going to be touching on the whole world of new agents.
And it's an exciting world, a daunting world if you're brand new, but also exciting because now's the opportunity to build your business the way you want to build it. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, yeah. How do you, maybe even just before we jump into this, how do you tend to help an agent that's in this position and more so from like a mental perspective where they jump into this career and there's like this level of excitement and then the level of excitement has died off when they realize how challenging this career may be. So maybe they're at like, the 3 to 6 month period. What are some ways that you would talk to them at that particular stage?
I read a really interesting quote the other day talking about as a real estate agent, you wake up unemployed every single day and having to start basically from nothing. And I think understanding that perspective, if you're somebody who's not self-motivated, you're going to have a very hard time in this business. And if you're somebody who can find the intrinsic motivation to get past rejection and pick yourself up every day, you're going to do great. So first of all, like build yourself some stamina. And second of all, understand that deal flow can take some time. So it's perfectly reasonable and expected that you may not get your first closing for the first few months of your career. So prepare yourself for that financially, give yourself a little bit of a runway because you're not going to get paid, obviously, within the first 2 weeks of working.
Yeah,
That's always a hard
that's
thing for some people.
but that's such a good point. And I think that, I mean, when you get into this industry, you do kind of think you're going to get out there, you're going to start working with buyers, you're going to get a seller right away, you're going to get a commission check maybe in like 3 months. You understand it's 100% commission, but maybe 3 months or so, and then you get in, you're like, holy smokes, maybe this isn't what I thought it was going to be. But I think you touched on two really good points there. Number one is the sales cycle of real estate. And so many times I think you and I both get hit with the question of like, how do I generate more leads? How do I get more deals? And it's like, you need to understand that people aren't just going to buy and sell every single day. You do have to play the long term with this career. But if you do play the long game, you can be wildly successful, but you just have to be prepared for that going into it.
You have to be prepared, and sometimes you get lucky, but most of the time you don't. So prepare for the worst and get excited if something good comes your way. It
Totally.
reminds me, you and I both know this agent because we used to work with her. She was on our team, but she was brand new, and I was working very heavily with her, training her on exactly what to do as a brand new agent. And I accompanied her to her first showing because she'd never been to a showing before. She'd never done one. She was so sweet. She showed up so well prepared. I was incredibly impressed. She had all kinds of documentation for the person that she was meeting. This was a lead that she just met off basically the internet from someone who wanted to see some properties. So she didn't know much about her. She came very well prepared and she was ready to show this property. The woman looked around it. 2 minutes later, she looks at her and says, "Okay, I want it. What do I do?" And
Really?
I was laughing so hard inside because like, as soon as the woman left and the door shut, I turned to her and I said, "You have to know this will probably never happen to you again." So just relish in the fact that your very first lead, your very first showing will result in your very first sale, potentially. And it did. She closed the woman and she ended up working with her for the next few years and became one of her best clients. So it was a hilarious story, but that is definitely the exception, right? That doesn't happen to most people that they're going to sell a property their very first time they show something.
That's so true. That's such a fun story. And I mean, that's an encouraging story too when she gets into it. But the other thing that I'm thinking is like you as a newer agent, you just have to put yourself in more positions where things like that can happen. So it's not
Yes.
like, and a lot of times with new agents, they're like, well, what do I say at an open house to get a lead? Well, you know what? Most open houses aren't going to result in some buyer who's ready to start looking at homes tomorrow. Like most of them won't, but you are going to land a number of them throughout your career where they're going to be very, very fruitful. Sometimes you just don't know which one. So it's about like putting yourself in these positions that you can end up being lucky like this.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, there's so many tips I think we could jump into. Do you have any favorite tips if you're sort of new and looking to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think when you're brand new, there's a few things that come to mind for me, and I think you need a strategy for the short term, you need a strategy for the midterm, and you need a strategy for the long term. And oftentimes, agents are just very fixated on the short term. Like, how do I find somebody who's looking to buy or sell now? But that's also probably the most difficult and and least likely to truly go anywhere. But you still want to have something that is going to lead you to something potentially sooner rather than later. But for your short term, you're trying to get a deal done, I would say, in 6 months. For the midterm, you're like 6 months to 2 years. For the long term, you're 2 years plus. So I think sometimes agents think short term is like 0 to 2 months, and that's not the case. Like a short term deal is if you get somebody and then they're looking to buy and sell within 6 months' time. So really, and I mean, there's a number of strategies that we can chat through, but I think every single agent does require short-term, midterm, and long-term strategy. But where they're going to make the majority of their money in their career is going to be the long-term strategies. It's not going to be the short-term strategies. But I do understand the desire to try and get a couple of quick wins under their belt.
Yeah, and once you implement your short to medium strategies and you're starting to work with people and you're active, you're showing properties, you're doing open houses, once you get people over that sort of hump and they're getting ready to buy or sell, they will. And you will sort of see this flywheel effect happen of that work, but it's like 3 to 6 months of grind. And then you start getting the deals coming in. And then you have to wait 2 months to close. So that part can be hard. But by the time that time passes, the experience you would have gained, the relationships that you would have nurtured will put you in a position to keep increasing your deal flow as you continue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the flywheel effect is one that most agents will learn a little bit later on in their career, or they'll see it kind of progress when they look at, okay, I did 20 deals this year, and let's map out where all of these people came from. And they all come from some version of a flywheel. And for folks that don't know what a flywheel is, basically, as you start to work this flywheel, the flywheel moves faster, just to like simplify it. And you can think of it like a well. When you're pumping water, as the water comes up through the well, it starts to move it even faster. So it becomes this, like, in a sense, a positive feedback loop. And that's what real estate is. But the challenging part is getting it started. Once you get the flywheel started, and you and I both know agents like this, they're at a point in time in their career, they're happy with their level of production. They have been producing at a level that works for them. They don't necessarily want to increase it. They don't want to decrease it either. And you ask them, like, what are they doing for prospecting? And some of them are like, you'd be surprised at how little I do. And that's not what you need to do as a new agent. But as you start to scale that flywheel, if you're taking care of people and you're generally doing even the bare minimum when it comes to prospecting, it just keeps going. And that's really what real estate can afford us. But we do have to get that wheel turning, which is what we'll, of course, discuss today as we jump into these questions. Yeah. Okay, so let's jump into question number 1 here. I'm a newly licensed agent with a very experienced but hands-off broker, which I appreciate. But what are the top 3 things that I can start doing immediately to generate revenue? What are some things that come to mind?
Well, the first one that comes to mind for me, and I've seen people build hugely significant businesses off of it, but it is market specific. So it won't work for everybody. But agents who start by doing rentals can generally generate a pretty large database quickly, have a little bit of cash flow, and then be able to turn those tenants into buyers. Because people who rent, more often than not, become people that buy in the next couple of years. I remember one fellow at my office used to do 12 rentals a month. And it's a huge amount of work. He was brand new, but he did them. And in our market, you get paid half a month's rent plus HST because we're in Canada. And so on a short-term rental, it's not a lot of cash, but if you're doing at least a year-long rental and you're banging out 12 of them, it's pretty good money, actually. It's a lot of work, but it's pretty good money. And I think a lot of agents don't want to do rentals because it doesn't seem glamorous, but that's how I started in my business too. I remember back in the day, I mean, rent was a lot cheaper. My commission checks after my splits with my brokers on some of these rentals were $300.
Really?
And it was a lot of work. Yep. Because I had a big split with my broker because he was providing me a lot of leads. Plus the rental amounts were low. You know, sometimes you could get a $1,200 a month rental. So that wasn't a lot of cash, but the opportunity to meet people and then meet people within that network helped me build a business. So I would certainly suggest doing rentals. The other really great thing about providing services to tenants is the money is quick. So usually you're looking to help a tenant and they'll want to move in within 30 days, 60 days at the very longest, and sometimes instantly. So you'll get paid quickly, which is great. The second thing it allows you to do is to really get to know neighborhoods and buildings. And if you're operating in an urban center with hundreds of condo buildings, it is a brilliant way for you to get into these buildings, learn the amenities, get to know the concierge, tell the concierge who you are, be friendly, leave business cards, say, hey, I'm always looking to help tenants or sellers or buyers in this building, hand my card out. They will. I used to do that all the time as an agent. So it helps you familiarize yourself. You'll become an expert. You'll know where to park, you know what the amenities are, you know the layouts of the units, and that will sort of fast track your expertise. So to me, rentals are the absolute first thing you should do as a brand new agent.
Such a good call. And, like as a newer agent, generally you have more time and less budget. And then
Yep.
as you scale your business, your time goes down and your budget goes up. And as a new agent, you should really be focused on the fact that time is something that you have as, in a sense, like a competitive advantage over somebody who has scaled their business. And so you have the ability and you have the time to handle these rentals. And what's also going through my mind is like, even if you're getting paid $500, $700 to do a deal, like you're still getting that, you're getting paid to put a person into your database. Where in
Yes.
almost every other case, you pay to get a person in your database. In this case, you are getting paid to put the person in your database. And then the downside is you have to allocate time. But as a new agent, that's what you have. That is your differentiator. As you start to scale up, you don't have that time anymore, so you can't take on that lease. But it's a really good strategy. And I would say even in markets where it's less common, it's still a strategy that dealing with tenants or helping tenants along the way. It's just, I even think in my mind, because in my market, we don't actually do a lot of rentals, but there's a lot of times where I've like jumped on a call with a tenant and walked them through different communities and said, this is probably where you want to focus your efforts. And then they've turned around and bought a home 2 years later, and they've referred all their friends while they've been in this lease. So it's even if you're in a market where you're not doing it as much, I know that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get revenue right away, but you're still getting people put into that database.
100%. You
Yeah.
also learn the regulations, the laws in your area, right? Which will help you work with investors or sellers down the line if they have tenants. So to me, it's a real win-win, and there's a lower risk to you messing up a deal on a rental, right? Of
Good
course,
point.
there's clauses that are important, and of course you want to do the best, but if you mess up something on a rental, the stakes are lower than on a, $3 million purchase with a very experienced seller. So it sort of allows you to get your toes wet, understand the process, how to work with other agents, how to negotiate. And as I said, the stakes are a little lower for you.
Love it. Absolutely love it. One suggestion I'd have for a newer agent is you need to befriend an agent at your office that's a high producing solo agent. And this is somewhat of a cheat code I found for agents who need to get deals under their belt right away. And there's a few important points. Number one is a busy agent. So that agent needs to be having enough deal flow that they probably can't handle everything that comes in. And then number two, you want to focus on a solo agent because of course, if there's a team, if there's any additional deal flow, it's just going to filter down to their team. So you want to focus on very busy solo agents and befriend them, but not like in a way like, hey, Jess, I want to be your friend. Like that's probably not going to work. But coming up to you and being like, I really admire your business, Jess, and what you've been able to build. You are where I want to be within X number of years. Is there any suggestions that you have for me? And then from that conversation, offer free work for that agent, like running feature sheets, doing lock boxes. Can I just shadow you on a showing? You tell me the time and I will be there. And as soon as that agent starts to see that, these busy agents, it's so shocking to me when I'm working with agents, how many busy agents just don't respond to leads.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny? Like there are so many agents that a lead comes in on a listing and maybe they respond, but their response is basically like, sorry, we already got a couple offers on it. Well, I'll let you know if it comes back to market. Like there's not really trying to convert that because they actually don't want that lead. And most busy agents also want to see if they could potentially get a referral from that lead, but they don't necessarily have anybody that they trust to send it to. And I have seen agents that befriend a top agent at their office, and that literally fuels them for 2 to 3 years. Like they are just that's enough to put food on their table, build their database, and start doing deals. And the beautiful thing is this doesn't have to be one agent. This can be multiple agents. This can even be agents not at your office. This can be agents at other offices that you just admire. And but you do have to them. They do have to be solo agents. They do have to be busy, and you do have to do free work for them. You have to do all of those things. And don't say you're going to do free work and then just disappear when the work actually comes. That doesn't work so well.
No, you have to be willing to do it and you have to be available and you have to be keen. I couldn't agree with this more. I did the exact same thing and I credit some top agents that I got to know very early in my career for helping me get my first listing, know how to book a showing, know how to respond to an offer. Because a lot of the times you're not really prepared for the ins and outs of the business, getting your license. And if you are with a sort of hands-off broker, that could be more challenging. So something to think about when you're newly licensed. Do you want to join a team? Or do you want to join a big office and try and find a mentor? Because I think those are two paths, but you do have to work with somebody who's experienced and you have to be in the office talking to them.
Yeah. And there's no path there that's go and be solo and just do your own thing in your corner. Like it's
Yeah.
either join a team or find a mentor or find multiple mentors. But those mentors will give you, and the knowledge is probably more valuable than the one or two deals. But the handful of deals that you can do over the course of a year for this person can add up to paying for groceries and paying for rent, so that you're not in the red. What's next on your list?
We talk about this all the time, so people are probably just going to nod along and smile here, but you need to talk to as many people as you can about real estate each and every day. So one of the things I brought up earlier when we were talking about rentals was getting to know the concierge. That is a no-brainer to me. If you've decided to farm a certain area or a certain bunch of buildings, you should get to know the concierge that works there because they see people in and out all day long and they sort of get to understand who's buying or selling or looking to move. That's key. Um, Same with local businesses. Like if you've decided to farm a certain neighborhood, and to be honest, it probably should be your neighborhood where you live because you know it best. Get to know local shops, ask if you can put your business card or a flyer up, ask if you could do, a shout out to them on social media or some type of partnership. Like try to get to know the locals in your area. And if you can be seen as the friendly neighborhood expert right off the bat, sometimes that's an easy sort of jumping off point to get to know people in your area.
Love it. Absolutely, absolutely love it. I think that oftentimes in real estate, the whole B2B approach is lost on a lot of agents. Like we kind of think that our client is, an everyday consumer. It's almost like a B2C, like business to consumer. And it truly is. That is our business. But business owners can be such a huge referral source for us because they know the value of a referral. And that's why we're huge advocates for getting ingrained into the business community of your city because they are so good at providing referrals. They know the value of those. It's a really good suggestion.
And if you live in a building or an area, see if there's a way that you can, I don't know, have a seminar on real estate in your party room or offer some information for sellers about what's recently sold. Like there's ways to be known as the building or neighborhood expert right off the bat. And because you live there, it'll be easier for you to become that expert in the area.
Totally, totally, absolutely. My next one would be communities. And what I mean by communities is you have to have a group of people that you're around on a regular basis that know you. And this doesn't actually, it probably isn't going to be in the domain of real estate. It's going to be in something else. And so this can be around some sort of shared interest. This can be around a certain type of organization. Like, for example, maybe it's business. Maybe this shared interest is some sort of sport or some activity. Maybe it's some sort of cause. Maybe it's just some sort of just opportunity for people to get together. And I know that's being kind of general, but I think most people are getting the point. This can be anything where you are showing up on a regular basis. And then generally there's an opportunity for you to meet like 50 plus people. So if it's a community where you have the opportunity to meet like 5 or 6 people on a regular basis, that's fine. Enjoy that. But focus on these communities where there's like 50 plus people that you can meet on a regular basis. And maybe this is through some sort of networking event, but oftentimes it's just through, and even like you said, it can even be your community. And we think of geofarming like we're going to be sending out flyers to everybody, but then we don't think of geofarming as how can I get most involved in the community? And so geofarming can form part of this too. But instead of just thinking through flyers, think through how can I actually ingrain myself in the community.
I love that. Yeah, proximity can turn into leads. If you just show up time and time again, people get to know your face at these events and you have these conversations, you become the person that they think about.
Yeah. And you don't have to be experienced either. Like you don't have to have 10, 15 years of real estate under your belt. If you can speak to a community, know the sales in the community, you've already have a sense of authority within that community because you know where the sales are happening. Any agent with MLS access can do that. Awesome. Let's
Good
move
tips.
on to the next question.
Okay.
I'm feeling very lost right now. So my question to you is, I'm pretty new to the city and state that I live in, so I don't know many people. I've got my real estate license last fall. I also can't stand social media, but I'm willing to get over that. So all that being said, how do I become a successful agent when I don't have an SOI anywhere near me? How do I build a business plan, a database, or anything when I don't have people around me that I can add to it?
This is a tricky one, but it's not unique. Like a lot of people are in this situation and have formed extremely successful real estate businesses. And I think we touched on a lot of the sort of tips in the earlier question, but I think first and foremost, understand that real estate is a people business and relationships come before transactions. So any way that you can form relationships with people and ingrain yourselves into their day or into their week or into the community is going to help you. So think about who you are. And this kind of comes down to the idea of a niche too, right? Like if let's say you're a parent, make sure that you're there in the morning and after school doing pickup and drop off. Volunteer on the parent committee. Join the WhatsApp group in your neighborhood where people are like chatting about things that are going on. Um, Talk as much as you can with other parents and have play dates with their kids and don't form a business relationship, just form a relationship with these people. And just over time, you will become the person that they ask real estate questions to. So number one, like form relationships. That's has to be how it is. And it's easier to do it, I would say, in person than on social media if that doesn't come easily to you. But you should also try and establish a little bit of a social media presence, I would say, which this person says that they're willing to do.
They're willing to
And
try.
they're willing to try. Yeah. What would you say?
Well, a lot of what you're saying as well, but I think kind of this thought process of I don't know anybody in my city, it's fairly common. And even for people that grew up in a city and they're like, oh shoot, now I'm in real estate and now I have to start to know people. And I didn't realize this, 3 years ago before I was even thinking about real estate. But what I've seen is it's not how many people you know at that given time. It's how committed you are to meeting new people. Like I've seen agents who basically get dropped off in a new city and start their real estate business. And within a few years' time, they're top producers. And you're like, well, how can that theoretically be the case? You didn't know anybody. And it's just because they dedicated themselves like to the craft and the skill set of trying to meet as many people as possible and being really good at it. And so it's almost like, it's not about how smart you are. It's about how good you are at learning something. It's the same thing with people skills like this. It's not about how many people you know. It's about how willing and how good are you going to become at getting to know more people. Because even in reality, like if I'm in a city and people in that city know me as Mike, the friend, the XYZ guy for years and years. And then I go and get my real estate license. Something that kind of hits people with a ton of bricks is sometimes those people that you're expecting to just send you referrals, they don't do it. And that's because they see you as a friend or they see you as the person who was at your previous career. And it takes time for these people to now see you as a real estate agent. And so you as somebody who doesn't know anybody, you are starting off like them in many ways too. You may know people, but they don't actually see you as an agent. So I just think that these types of agents that are new to a city need to get very, very good and very disciplined at meeting new people. And they'll be wildly surprised how quickly they can surpass the agent who's already done or who already has a large network.
Yeah, it's so true. Okay, so I recently saw this post, and I might have sent it to you too. And it was a really interesting study, which I actually think might be a little bit illegal now that I think about the details of it. But they ran a test. First of all, they went door knocking in a certain community, knocked on all the doors and asked who's the top agent in the area. They got certain answers, blah, blah, blah. They left. Okay. Then they created this fake agent profile and they started flyering this neighborhood again. And they did what's called an 8 by 8. So for 8 weeks, they send out 8 flyers to this neighborhood. After that, they went back to the neighborhood. They knocked on all the doors. They asked who the top agent was. It was this pretend agent that they had fabricated. And so it really goes to show, first of all, don't do that if you're an agent, because it's probably it probably goes against your local real estate board rules. But it just goes to show you that if you end up in front of somebody enough, you're seen as an expert, even if that person hasn't necessarily used you. So how can you get in front of more people is the question that needs to be answered.
Totally, totally. My TikTok feed is like blowing up by that study. I feel like every time I go on TikTok, I see some other version of that. But I think it speaks to just this concept of like proximity and familiarity. Like these people are seeing a flyer, and there's that level of proximity. So they're seeing it regularly, and then there's familiarity. There's a familiarity built, and then that's the top agent. I think that there's a lot that can be gleaned from that, and you don't even need to be a real person in this case.
You can be fake.
Moving on to the social media comment, because I do think that comment's worth us discussing. And so she says, I can't stand social media, but willing to get over that. And
Yep.
I guess, first off, what are your thoughts? Let's say an agent comes to you and says, look, I'm not a social media person. I'm not going to be on social media ever. Am I going to be able to build the type of business I want to build? And that's a top producing agent business.
I would say maybe. I think in this day and age, you have to have a social media presence. And I have a strong opinion that if you want to be a really successful agent, you should be out there sharing your opinion in some form. Maybe it's a blog post, maybe it's a tweet, maybe it's an Instagram reel. You should be sharing your opinions and your thoughts and your stories from your work, because it gets people sort of into your circle, and it makes people get to know you, or at least they feel that they get to know you. So I think no matter what, you got to get on social media. And my advice would be, instead of doing sort of generic posts that a lot of real estate agents do that are kind of just fluffy and done by either AI or somebody that you hire, perhaps what you want to do is post less frequently, but post a story about a deal that you've just worked on, or an opinion that you have, maybe something that bugs you about the real estate industry, or maybe a day in the life of a realtor. Like, there's got to be something that you like talking about when it comes to real estate. And if you're uncomfortable on video, maybe it's tweeting. Maybe you want the written form could be another option. So it doesn't necessarily have to be you on camera, but I think you do need to have a presence. And I think it's one of those things that like doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, but it will get easier if you do it. So I would say just dedicate yourself. We do a lot of this in our coaching to, let's say, 1 day a week, you spend an hour on social media, and that's what you're committing to for now.
That's a really good point. And I agree with you. I think usually when this comes up, I can't stand social media. Like my next question is like, tell me a little bit more about that. And oftentimes where that ends up going, I find, is the agent has some level of fear of posting. Like they're concerned about how they're going to appear. It's not that they hate the idea of social media, although some are very against just, what it can do to their attention span and things like that, which I understand, but there is a way around that too. It's more of a fear, I find, than when you can't stand social media. It can just be, I'm just afraid of posting and putting myself out there. And so if that's the case, then my advice is you really need to do it. You really need to do it. Because if it's just coming from a place of fear, that's something that we can definitely overcome all as individuals. And like you said, it's a matter, you can't think your way out of it. You post your way out of it. As funny as it sounds, you don't think your way out of that fear, you post your way out of that fear. And if it comes down to a point of you just not liking social media because of it's hijacking our brains and things like that, I get it. I mean, I try to avoid social media for long stretches of time for that reason too. But there's a difference, I think, between scrolling on social media and posting on social media. And so if you don't like that element of it and you feel like you're not as a productive of person when you're scrolling on social media, then post and don't scroll. Like there is a way around that where you can post. And for example, even on Instagram, like we're post quite consistently on our Instagram. I'm not on Instagram scrolling very frequently. I'm just not, because it doesn't usually make me feel better about myself after I've scrolled for an hour on Instagram. So I just don't tend to do it as much. But Twitter, I get that from my news sources and information. TikTok, I like a little bit of entertainment. So you kind of, if it's a matter of you not liking it because of that purpose, just don't scroll as much. But if it's a matter of being fearful, I would say you really should do it in that case, because in many ways, real estate can be a vehicle to personal development.
Yeah, I agree. And the other flip side to social media is maybe you don't like posting, but do you like getting quick access to your network? Because that's an opportunity that you gain from social media, right? Like, how many other times can you see what your past client is doing in a day and send them a quick comment to stay top
Totally.
of mind? Inboxes, DMs, commenting on people's posts that you will be top of mind if you do that continuously within your network. So maybe you start there. Maybe you try to get as many people as you know on your social network and you commit to posting, say, once a week, but you commit to reaching out, commenting, engaging on social media on other people's posts and stories on a more frequent basis. And maybe that's a part of it that you enjoy a bit more.
That's such a good point. That's such a good point. And your point too around if it's the content creation, just do a 1 day content creation day. We advocate for that all the time, which is
Yeah.
just have 1 day where you're creating content. And during that day, generally you're not prospecting, you're not doing anything else other than just creating content. And because a lot of times there's this whole concept of consistency being an issue in social media, and I get it. Like it is basically like you're on a treadmill, you're on a conveyor belt where like the post goes out and the post disappears, the post goes out, the post disappears. And I was listening to this podcast yesterday actually, and it was a creator podcast on like content creators. And he said this interesting point. He said, when you're a content creator, you constantly have this like hum, like a refrigerator of anxiety constantly going because there's always another post to post. And he says, I just like the imagery of it being like this hum of a refrigerator where it's like, hey, well, the queue's empty. So now we got to start posting more. And it's this continuous cycle. So how do you get ahead of that? Like, you're not going to stop the continuous cycle. The algorithm's going to work the way the algorithm works. The way you get ahead of that is just have 1 day a week that's dedicated to content creation. And you're going to notice that you're going to be able to create a ton of content. If you block out 4 to 6 hours to just create content, you're going to pump out a lot of posts and you're going to be set for the whole week.
And don't overthink it. Like, you're not going to create beautiful, you know, movie versions of scenes and posts like you're seeing on social media for $1 million listing. Like, just talk about something or post some news that's come up in your neighborhood or tell a quick story. Like, take the pressure off yourself of making it perfect. And once you have a whole bunch of squares filled up in your Instagram or tweets out there in your Twitter, it's going to feel a lot easier and it's going to come at a quicker pace for you. So just put something out there. It doesn't have to be your absolute best work, but at least being consistent, I think, is more important than necessarily the production value of the post.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the production value of it, like I was talking to an agent, this was earlier this week, and he was like, I am really noticing that the lower production value I have, the more views and the more engagement I get. And I know that this concept has been out there for a while, but he told me, he's like, I never believed it. And he's like, now I'm actually like seeing it in the data. And I think that word data is a pretty important one too. And it's that when we're posting, instead of worrying about creating the perfect type of content that's going to resonate with everybody, start posting and then using that data on what people are engaging with to create more of those types of posts. And I think thinking like a scientist in this case goes a really long way with social media instead of trying to perfect it, because you never will. And I have been shocked sometimes. You'll put something out and you're like, this is total crap. It's not going to go anywhere. And it blows up. And then you put out something that you like put all this blood, sweat, and tears into, and it's a flop. And so I don't think there's a way of entirely figuring out other than just trying to analyze the data as you progress with it.
Yeah. And one final tip, and this kind of ties into the social media, is this type of person, I think, has a big opportunity in front of them in terms of figuring out a niche. So this person just got their license a few months ago or almost 9 months ago, and they're pretty new to an area. So I think now is a great opportunity for them to decide like who is their ideal customer and how do they form a niche around that. It could be an area, it could be a type of person. Let's say, for example, they're sort of a younger person and they want to work with first-time buyers. Well, maybe you can then create a niche around first time buyers, provide value to that age group or that demographic, talk about that on social media, and you'll become sort of known as that person. Versus a lot of agents become what I call generalists, right? They'll service any area, any type of person. And that's fine for a lot of people. Many people have very successful careers doing that. But if you're new and you're more passionate about working with a certain type of buyer or seller or demographic or area in the market, now's your chance to choose that and sort of double down on it. So that could be kind of fun, right? Because it's harder to do later in your career when you're busier. Now you can be quite thoughtful about who you want to be known as.
That's such a good point. And you also don't have to worry about it being perfect from day one, in the sense that you can change your niche. A lot of agents do as they progress too. So even if you're, a lot of times I just find there's a lot of analysis paralysis when it comes to selecting a niche. And it's like,
Yeah.
what gives you life? You think about this type of consumer. I think about investors, and I love myself a good Excel spreadsheet when I'm analyzing a home. Great. Go down that road. Don't worry if it's not the right road. You can pivot. You're totally allowed to do that.
Permission granted.
Permission granted. Awesome. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode. Remember, you can reach out anytime at revrealestateschool.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next lesson.